la siguiente sesión, que es de Jefferson, Yallico, de la Pontificia Unidad Católica de Ecuador, con un trabajo sobre blockchain y IoT. O sea, adelante. Muchas gracias.
Well, good afternoon and welcome. My paper is related to blockchain and IoT, challenges and its role in security. This is a brief overview. The authors, Jefferson, Yallico and Diego Avila-Pesantez. So about the outline, we have an introduction, an analysis based on 3 main research questions, and finally the conclusions. So to start with the introduction, Satoshi Nakamoto, as said before, was the first to establish the foundation of blockchain through an innovative method called Bitcoin. It was back in 2009. So this method allowed online payments to be made without being part of a trusted party by utilizing a simplified payment process with blockchains. What was the main function? The main application in this case of blockchain involves digital cryptocurrencies, such as the ones mentioned before, where users interchange money with help with a decentralized network. So the research focus of this paper is basically in IoT and blockchain integration, the current blockchain and IoT main fields, and challenges and security. So the 3 main research questions are: research question 1, what are the main current IoT environments where blockchain is being applied? The second one is, what is the current role of blockchain upon security in IoT? And the third and last one, what are the challenges involved in blockchain-based IoT environments? So the results about the question number 1, about the environments, we came to the conclusion that security and privacy is the highest one, with 31.8% of the total of the papers. That is 46% of the overall quantity. The second one, where blockchain and IoT is being implemented the most, is healthcare with 19.59%. That is 29 papers found about this topic. And the other one, let me hide this. The other one is industry with 14.19% of the total of the papers. And finally, the energy sector with 9.46% of the total papers. So moving to the next question related to security, we found 12 authors talking about this, about blockchain and IoT security field. So in this context, Afandi and Kenji made a compilation of articles aimed to IoT security and privacy boost. So on this behalf, they propose solutions and recommendations on how blockchain can surpass these issues related, of course, to improvements and something like that. They also mention the susceptibility to some kind of attacks. On the other hand, Mohanta addressed security and privacy issues through blockchain. They also say that IoT lacks of the storage capacity, that's already known, and that is not enough processing power to implement this alone. And finally, the cryptography technique is not strong to overcome attacks, such as node capture attacks, replay attacks, side channels attacks, and false data injection. This is related to IoT. So the next author mentioned he proposed also several parameters to strengthen security in IoT. How? Using a shared ledger to avoid using a third-party object, consensus protocol to maintain the transaction sequence, and cryptography and a smart contract to detect the message integrity and whether the sender is a valid user or not. So as a conclusion, these parameters contribute to a secure communication utilizing ledgers to store encryption keys, user authentication through digital signatures, the discovery of legitimate IoT devices as well. And the next one, and this is the smallest one, Mirez and Ali, They said that blockchain is a catalyst for security, privacy, reliability, and scalability. This is part of cybersecurity also. How? They say that blockchain can help to impede spoofing and data and tampering by administrating and securing industrial devices of IoT. On the other hand, Al-Kurdi described in his paper Blockchain in IoT Security, this is a survey, describe blockchain components, structure, private and public one. They also compare blockchain security versus standard cybersecurity, mentioning denial of service attack, trust levels, and proof of work. So, in terms of security, they point out that there is a possibility that both technology could be vulnerable to the same attack. This is a denial of service attack because in blockchain, it can be triggered by sending more transactions, overloading its capability. Whereas in a common IoT environment, as the other environments, it's quite similar because it could be achieved by simply overloading the server. This paper about solutions to security and privacy issues, EU analyzed security and privacy issues in IoT related to data integrity, authentication, and access control, data sharing, and privacy, which are, for example, vital points due to all this information is gathered from one sensor, from a single sensor or many sensors, and the communication could be easily violated, allowing data leakage, for example, preferences, healthcare information, and location. So consequently, the authors provide a blockchain-based solution to overcome the issues described as well as a data sharing framework. Moving to the next point about mechanisms, Minoli and Occhio Grosso reviewed several challenges upon the implementation of security mechanisms. They mentioned that integrity problems can be solved by using blockchain or digital signatures. They also said that confidentiality could be solved with encrypted data and VPNs, and availability using intrusion detection systems such as firewall. As a conclusion, they also present several uses of blockchain and an in-layer security mechanism that covers 7 layers where blockchain is being applied. Another mechanism proposed by Agrawal is related to maintaining continuous security in an IoT using blockchain. How? By analyzing a legitimate user within a valid Internet of Things zone. This is dividing into IoT devices in zones. The authors utilize a pre-generated crypto token-based blockchain to avoid unauthorized access as a key. As a consequence, the system security is enhanced. So moving to the next point, this is one of the most complete papers of my research. It's about IoT information sharing security mechanism based on blockchain technology. In this context, C proposed a lightweight information sharing security framework based on blockchain, data blockchain, and transactions blockchain. They also, in this research, carried out an analysis on this mechanism to evaluate the tampering success rate, showing that by increasing the block gap, the attacker's tampering success rate decreases dramatically. The authors also improved the Byzantine fault tolerance. This was awesome algorithm in order to make it efficient and lightweight for IoT, because common consensus algorithms is resource intensive and time consuming. On top of that, a detailed table of blockchain and IoT attack and response analysis is given, categorizing it by the attack mode, and defense mechanism. This could be so helpful for a person who is maybe researching about the cybersecurity field. So finally, to conclude with the question number 2, cybersecurity to blockchain technology was maybe, how can I say that, was developed in this paper of Matthew He utilized the quantitative analysis to determine the applicability of blockchain in the field of cybersecurity. As a result, he demonstrated that IoT back in 2019 reported the most blockchain implementation with 45% of the total, followed by data storage and sharing with 16%. Finally, publicly infrastructure and data privacy with 7%. The last one is Sahari, with his paper Use of Blockchain in Strengthening Cybersecurity and Protecting Privacy. He agrees that IoT has several loopholes, allowing any kinds of attack, such as the one back in 2016 called Mirai. This was a malware focused on trying default passwords and usernames in IoT devices. And the final question about the challenges that blockchain and IoT implementation is facing. From 15 papers, 18 challenges were identified on blockchain integration in the fields mentioned earlier. The most important ones are security with 75% of the total, which means that blockchain integration with other technologies is not that easy due to there are many factors to be considered before. The second one is privacy, which is of paramount importance in any field. It has 62.5%. That means decentralization is not the only one to bear in mind in order to guarantee this fact. And the third place is shared between limited resources and scalability, which is 50% for each one. And without a shadow of doubt, and since IoT is not designed as a powerful technology, as we know, the blockchain integration is a great challenge due to this technology demands a great number of resources, for example, that IoT lacks. This is, for instance, the storage capacity. On the other hand, scalability also represents a challenge because IoT can generate gigabytes of data, and due to some blockchain implementations, can only manage a few transactions per second, so it could lead to a bottleneck in the communication. So moving to the next conclusion, this paper conducted a review to determine which environments of IoT are implementing blockchain to strengthen security and privacy. As a result, as we saw in the first page, blockchain is being implemented the most in the field of security, in cybersecurity. The next one is healthcare, and finally energy and the industry sector. So as the final conclusion, this review also helped to determine in which areas blockchain is being implemented the most, its current role on security and privacy, and the challenges it faces towards implementation in this vast field of IoT, shall I say. So that's all about my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jefferson, for your presentation. Very interesting. As I am aware, at least, IoT is still kind of immature on security, especially. But what I see is that there are more advances eventually on technology like blockchain, instead of providing a common standard to enable security for IoT devices. Is that correct? So everyone, each supplier decides how to implement things relying on a technology like blockchain, but there is no standard which says, okay, this is standard for IoT is secure, let's say. I don't think there is something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course, is that correct? It's not such a standard, shall I say, but instead, any industry, for example, could implement blockchain. Is still making proofs. Is not defined practically, or you don't have any standard to say I'm going to implement blockchain in my industry, because it's not done yet. But it could
Okay.
be in the future, I think, in the near future, it could be created to be implemented in some kind of field. But it's still in research. Yeah.
Okay. Well, since IoT is spreading so much, one would expect that as a consumer for any IoT device, you can be assured through a standard and not through the implementation, the best maybe, but an implementation that you cannot check. So you're exposed to using whatever the designer choose to do instead of relying on a standard eventually. But well, surely a standard will come soon. Well,
Yeah, sure.
thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos por su
Okay.
participación. Muchas gracias por todos por cumplir los tiempos de una prolijidad increíble. Y bueno, muchas gracias por participar en Urucon. Seguimos con las demás sesiones. Los invitamos a conectarse en las sesiones y luego en el stage que hay más presentaciones. Bueno,
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
adiós.